Good evening. I'm Carolyn Rye, Chair of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, and I hereby call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. on this 26th day of January 2021. Pursuant to the state of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Governor's executive orders, the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended by the Virginia General Assembly, and the School Board's April 7, 2020 emergency resolution, the school board and selected staff members will meet in person at the school administration building. However, at this time, it is impractical and unsafe to allow other persons to attend the school board meeting due to physical distancing and safety precautions related to the pandemic. Members of the public will be able to observe the school board meeting through live streaming on vbschools.com, broadcast on VBTV Channel 47, and on Zoom. Madam Clerk, would you kindly take attendance roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In school board chambers, we have Ms. Rye, Ms. Melnick, Ms. Manning, Ms. Felton, Ms. Riggs, Ms. Hughes, and Ms. Franklin. Attending via Zoom is Ms. Anderson, Ms. Weems, Ms. Owens, and Ms. Holtz.
Yes, Ms. Weems just contacted me and will be absent from this formal meeting due to the birth of a new grandchild just in the last hour or so ago. So she's with family now. She asked me to share that. Mrs. Anderson is participating from out of town. Mrs. Holtz and Ms. Owens due to health reasons, remote participation. With that, I ask you now to all join me in a moment of silence. Please stand as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have no awards and recognitions this evening, so we will proceed immediately to Agenda Item 7, Adoption of the Agenda. Any modifications to the agenda? I'll mention it was noted in the workshop that we will be proceeding with Agenda Item 17, a recurrence of our afternoon workshop. So with that, a motion to approve. Mrs. Riggs, a second. Mrs. Manning? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. So please show your approval with a raised hand. And Zoom participants, the raised hand feature, if you would.
Madam Chair, we have 10 votes in the positive of yay. So it did pass.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to Dr. Spence, your superintendent report.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. Here are a few items of interest for you and our families to know as we head towards this end of January. First, as a reminder, February 1st is a staff day. This coincides with the end of the first semester and term on January 29th and the beginning of the second semester and term on February 2nd. While Mondays are asynchronous on the current schedule anyway, our teachers do need a day to close out grades and prepare for new courses and in-person instruction, so there will not be any student assignments on February the 1st. In partnership with the Virginia Board of Education and the Department of Education, from January 25th to 29th, we are celebrating Virginia's School Principals Appreciation Week. This week's recognition, which was signed by Governor Northam, aims to honor the instructional leaders of our schools. As you all know, their roles are critically important, and we're very fortunate to have over 80 distinguished school principals and directors in support of education across our 86 schools and centers. This group works tirelessly to ensure that over 5,000 school staff and 65,000 children are provided with a learning environment each day that's safe, loving, and results in new learning experiences. So in a year unlike any other, they have redefined what learning looks like and have worked very hard to ensure that all students are supported, and being engaged. Please join us in recognizing our outstanding principals by using the hashtag VB Principal Week on your social media channels. Next, VBCPS students in grades 6 through 12, parents and guardians, staff, and community members can register for the 2021 Black History Program on February the 6th from 9 a.m. to noon, which will be on Zoom, by using the link available on vbschools.com. This Black History Initiative is an opportunity to enlighten and prepare all participants with resources to reflect upon and understand the lived experiences of others. And this program will also feature roundtable sessions focused on supporting our students, parents, and our local communities. Our keynote speaker is going to be Virginia Beach City Councilman Aaron Rouse, and we hope you can each join us online for this event. Up next is a highlight of one of our outstanding staff members. Every year, the Virginia Beach chapter of the Virginia State Literacy Association recognizes one leader as the James D. Mullen Leadership Reading Administrator of the Year. This award is given to an administrator who demonstrates true commitment to providing effective literacy instruction and who goes above and beyond to ensure teachers and students have access to high-quality literacy resources. I'm pleased to note that VBCPS Elementary Language Arts Coordinator Abigail Dougherty has been named the 2020-2021 recipient of this prestigious honor. Her dedication to developing a research-based curriculum and resources for literacy instruction, her leadership in coaching our division's reading specialists and literacy coaches, and her leadership in developing professional learning for teachers, teacher assistants, and instructional coaches and school administrators in the area of literacy have been extraordinary. Under her leadership, multiple cohorts of teachers and administrators are being trained in language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, also known as LETRS, implementing best practices and working to address the needs of all readers. Receiving this recognition at the local level allows for her to be considered for this prestigious award at the state level. So congratulations and thank you for your incredible contributions to our school division. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and that does conclude my reports.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. All right, we have two sets of meeting minutes to approve this evening, and we will begin with the January 5th, 2021 special school board meeting. Any modifications to these minutes? Okay, seeing or hearing none, a motion to approve. Mrs. Hughes, a second. Mrs. Melnick, okay. Any further discussion? All right, please show your approval with a raised hand.
Madam Chair, we have 10 votes in the affirmative, so the motion did pass.
Thank you. So now the January 12th, 2021 organizational and regular school board meeting. There is a modification to report with regard to one of the motions that evening. My name is mentioned as one who seconded one of the motions when in fact it was Mrs. Riggs, and Mrs. Riggs is in concurrence, and we've already discussed this with the clerk. So with that modification, are there any others? Okay, a motion to approve? Mrs. Felton?
Motion to approve, Bev Anderson.
So we'll put you in for a second, Mrs. Anderson? Is that agreeable?
Second.
Okay. Okay, please show your approval with raised hand.
Ms. Anderson, how do you vote? Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 10 yeses, so the motion did pass.
Thank you. All right. Agenda item 10, hearing of citizens and delegations on agenda items. The school board will now hear comments on agenda items from citizens and delegations who signed up with our clerk prior to this meeting. In-person speakers will be called first, followed by speakers participating via Zoom. As a reminder, each speaker has 4 minutes to present and will be given a 30-second warning before time expires. Once time has expired, we ask that you stop making remarks and allow the next speaker to queue in. Please keep in mind, the school board invites the public to also submit comments through our group email account, which can be found on our website. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you please introduce our first speaker?
Thank you. Our first speaker this evening is Tracy Liquid.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all again for your hard work at this time. Oops. So with COVID, with COVID, we've all been spending more time at home with our families, and over, I think it was during the summer during ESY, my mom had read a story in the Virginian Pilot that was written by Denise Watts, and her focus is Black history. And my mom was moved by the story. It's about the farmlands that were in the Wolf Snare area, which, if you guys, drive around or live in that area, it's beautiful. It's very quiet and seemingly peaceful. But the focus of that story was that it was the labor on that field was done by Black boys, African American boys, Negro boys, whatever they were called at that time. They might not have even been called children. And the lifespan at that time, whatever that time was, when we had fields and stuff like that, the lifespan was 8 years old. The Black children, boys, worked until they literally died. Picking, harvesting, whatever. And, we've got African American history as an elective, which is a great start, but it needs to be more. We're the capital of the Confederacy. We once were Virginia, and we should lead, as Northam is charging us all to do. We're the city, or we're the state that has the first equity, diversity, inclusion council or committee or whatever, a director. No other state in this nation. We are the leaders. He's charging us with that. We as a school system, you guys know we've got Dr. Parrott's awesome council or committee that I'm now a part of. And we're doing an equity analysis from human resources onward. Our curriculum should reflect our true history. We need to correct the history that has been oppressed. The voices of these Black boys, these people, should be heard. These awful stories that have been oppressed, that have been erased. I belong to the Filipino American National Historical Society, and one of our mantras is no history,
30 seconds.
N-O, no self. No history, K-N-O-W, no self. We need to allow the healing that has begun since, we need to allow the healing through history, this is our charge. We are a school system that we are teaching the children of tomorrow, today, and children of all ages.
And that is time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kara Hughes.
Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. I was fortunate enough to go to Tallwood High School, and I had Mr. Randy Lawrence as my high school guidance counselor. He was a great guy, always quick with a joke, and he was always there if you needed him. And when I was going over the statistics for our school system, was a little concerned that there's 400 students for every one school counselor. Now, with our students returning this coming week, I'm a little concerned because there's going to be, there was a lot of talking about the mental health of our students and getting them back in school. Okay. Well, we're all talking about our option 1 students. What about our option 2 students? Are we going to forget about them? Are there going to be school counselors there for the teachers and staff who are scared about taking home this virus that may be in the schools? They might be taking it home to their parents, their own older parents who are immune compromised, or their own kids, for that matter. We have a lot of immunocompromised children in this area, which is why they're option 2, and why their parents have been trying to teach from home, but have not been afforded the ability to teach virtually. So, everybody talked about mental health, or a few, I should say. There's a louder few than the majority, I should say. So, we lost a lot of teachers. A lot of our teachers also become counselors in a lot of ways because they look out for their students. Our teachers are phenomenal. I know how much I appreciate my daughter's teachers over the years, and she's only in 3rd grade. So, just looking at the school board for job postings, there's over 227 full and part-time jobs. And yes, some of them are for sports and for coaches and whatnot. Custodial staff is out the window. Teachers are not far behind there, too. So, our school counselors are going to be overwhelmed, I think, when we start back. And we better make sure we appreciate them with more than just a week of appreciation. And also, we need to also make sure to appreciate our teachers that are also working in that capacity. Because, reopening the schools is not the solution to fixing our broken social safety nets. It is not a teacher or a school counselor's job to fill in these systemic holes, even though most will do it. So just keep that in mind come February 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the end of our in-person speakers for agenda items. Our next speaker is online. It's Melinda Rogers. Please unmute.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on National Counselors Week. Having worked for Virginia Beach City Public Schools for a few years now, one thing I can say for certain, the counseling staff we have are amazing. However, our district does not have enough counselors to provide for the breadth of mental health issues currently plaguing both staff and students due to this pandemic. We have heard for months that due to virtual learning, students are struggling from unprecedented mental health issues. Parents and students alike have spoken about the struggles they have had with virtual learning and the toll it has been taking on their mental health. Teams of doctors have testified about the mental health struggles students are facing. I would dare say mental health has been the driving force to open our schools right now, despite being in the middle of a surge. So what I want to know is, how are you going to address mental health issues when our doors open next week? If we're going to honor counselors, let's start by acknowledging the fact that we overburden them. Currently, our student to counselor ratio is about 400 to 1. Everyone agrees that this pandemic has greatly increased our students' need for counseling and mental health interventions. How is one counselor supposed to handle the increased need for our students, especially knowing that in most cases, there will be far more than 150 students in each building? Is there a plan in place to help support students that does not involve asking the already overburdened staff to pick up the slack on top of everything else they've been asked to do? Next, will counselors also be able to help the Option 2 students who will continue to suffer from mental health issues when Option 1 students return to the buildings? Almost half our student population will continue to be virtual in the spring semester. What is the plan for helping Option 2 students to have equitable access to counseling? There must be equity here. Finally, what about the staff? The superintendent and board have effectively stolen our voice and choice. The metrics used to force staff into a decision have been thrown out, but it is expected that staff uphold their decision, even though the measuring tool that helped us make our decisions has been tossed aside. As stated in the workshop, staff requests were granted to switch options were exceedingly low. However, none of the staff were actually surveyed to get a full picture of who wants to switch options, which makes the reported staff numbers falsely low. All of this directly impacts our mental health. The American Federation of Teachers just reported that 530 K-12 teachers died of COVID-19 in 2020. Virginia Beach was included in those numbers. We know we are putting our lives at risk. Our classrooms are half the size of the boardroom that is currently being used, but instead of keeping the public out, we are expected to pack it in with only 3 feet of space between us. I could tell you about the countless sleepless nights I've had feeling like I have to choose my career or my spouse's life. And I know I'm not the only staff member who feels this way. Staff have no counselors in the buildings to help us cope with the loss of choice. What is the plan to help staff bear the mental load of being forced into an unsafe working environment while having to help students suffering from mental health issues simultaneously? A building will not fix the mental health issues that students have faced. Only trained professionals can address mental health issues, and currently we are woefully short. Mental health should never be used as a leverage, especially when it comes to children. If you're planning to champion for mental health, then make plans to actually help staff and students. Spend the necessary funding on hiring more trained counselors to deal with these issues instead of expecting staff to somehow figure it out. It would be a perfect way to celebrate National Counselors Week. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was our last agenda speaker.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So that brings us to the consent agenda portion of the meeting. I'll turn it over to our Vice Chair, Mrs. Melnick, at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First up, Mrs. Felton will read African American History Month.
Thank you, Ms. Milnick. Resolution for African American History Month, February 2021. Whereas African American history is recognized across the USA and Canada in February every year and highlights the accomplishments and contributions of African American, Pan-African people, and whereas African Americans have forged a proud legacy that reflects the spirit of our nation and community. For example, the first and only school for African American in Princess Anne County, now known as the City of Virginia, was Princess Anne County Training School, Union Kinsfield High School, which opened the fall of 1938 and whose alumni continue to make history today. And whereas it is imperative for the good of our nation that schools continue to build awareness and understanding of African American role models whose commitments and achievement embody the American spirit and pursue excellence and knowledge, the contribution made by African Americans despite struggles from freedom and equality. And whereas the 2021 theme, the Black Family, Representation, Identity, and Diversity, highlights the Black family through many disciplines such as history, literature, the virtual arts, and film studies, sociology, anthropology, and social policy. And whereas the school board of the City of Virginia Beach, through its core values, emphasize the importance of valuing differences within our school division. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the school board of the City of Virginia Beach officially recognize the month of February 2021 as African American History Month and its theme, the Black Family, Representation, Identity, and Diversity. And may it be fully resolved that the school board of the City of Virginia Beach encourages all citizens to support and participate in the various schools and community activities during African American History Month. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of the board, adopted by the school board of the City of Virginia Beach this 26th day of January 2021. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Resolution for Career and Technical Education Month. Whereas profound economic and technological changes globally have a direct impact on the structure and nature of work, thereby placing new and additional responsibilities on our educational system. And whereas career and technical education, which provides students with a career pathway for post-secondary education and workplace readiness, is the foundation of a strong, well-educated workforce, which fosters productivity and innovation in business and industry, and contributes to Virginia's leadership in the international marketplace. And whereas career and technical education gives students experience in practical, meaningful application of basic skills such as reading, writing, and mathematics, thus improving the quality of their education, motivating all students to achieve at high levels, and giving all students leadership opportunities in their communities. And whereas career and technical education offers individuals lifelong opportunities to learn new skills that provide them with the career choices, expanded learning potential, and job satisfaction. And whereas the ever-increasing cooperative efforts between career and technical educators, career and technical education administrators, and business and industry representatives stimulate the growth and vitality of our Commonwealth's economy by preparing students for careers in high demand, high wage, and highly technological skilled work in a global economy. Now therefore be it resolved that the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach officially recognizes the month of February 2021 as Career and Technical Education Month in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of this board, adopted by the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach this 26th day of January 2021. And the last resolution, Madam Chair, will be read by Mrs. Franklin.
Thank you. Resolution for National School Counseling Week, February 1 through 5, 2021. Whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors are employed to help students reach their full potential, and whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development, and whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children, and whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves. And whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. And whereas school counselors are a vital part of recovery efforts as they have adapted their programs to meet student and community needs in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas school counselors act as advocates for educational equity, they empower all students, close achievement gaps, and address systemic barriers. And whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school and life. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach recognize the first full week of February 2021 as National School Counseling Week in Virginia Beach City Public Schools, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of this board, adopted by the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach this 26th day of January 2021.
Thank you all. So the consent agenda this evening consists, again, as noted on the screen, the three resolutions that were just read. 1, African American History Month, February 2021. 2, Career and Technical Education Month. 3, National School Counseling Week. In addition, we have religious exemption. So with that, a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mrs. Felton, a second. Mrs. Melnick, please show your approval with raised hand.
Madam Chair, we have 10 yeses. The motion has passed.
Thank you. Okay, now on to the action portion of the agenda, item 12. Personnel report, administrative appointments, motion to approve. Mrs. Hughes, a second, Mrs. Manning. Any discussion? Okay, please show your support with a raised hand.
Mrs. Holtz, how do you vote? Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 10 votes in the affirmative, and the motion has passed.
Thank you. Action Section B, Policy Review Committee
Madam Chair.
recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry,
We do have
Dr.
some administrative
Spencer, you have
appointments.
appointments for us. I beg your pardon.
That's okay. Yes, ma'am, we do. I have two for you this evening to celebrate. First, I'd like to recognize Tori Beck. Tori has served in Virginia Beach as a teacher at Princess Anne Middle School, a math specialist at Bayside Middle School, most recently as administrative assistant at Bayside Middle School. And we're pleased you've accepted our recommendation for her to serve as the next assistant principal at Bayside Middle School. So congratulations to Mrs. Beck. Also, I'd like to recognize Angela Bubaropoulos. You all will recognize Angela. She served with distinction in Virginia Beach as a teacher at Bayside High School, a GRT at First Colonial High School. She's been an instructional specialist in language arts, a GRT at Salem High School. Most recently, she's been serving as the K-12 Gifted Instructional Specialist in the Office of K-12 and Gifted Programs in the Department of Teaching and Learning. We're pleased you've accepted our recommendation for her to serve as the next coordinator for gifted education in the Office of K-12 and Gifted Programs. And as always, there'll be an opportunity to formally introduce you to both of these new administrators in the future.
And we look forward to that. And our congratulations to these ladies. Okay, so
Good evening, Madam.
policy review recommendations. Yes, welcome, Mrs. Linetti.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, school board members, and Dr. Spence. I'm Cami Linetti, School Board Legal Counsel, and on behalf of the Policy Review Committee, I will be providing you information concerning the action items having to do with two of the bylaws. The reason these bylaws are in action is because they're bylaws and they require a 2/3 vote by the school board to pass. Two of these we've talked about before. 136 is open meetings and closed meetings. The first section of this has multiple parts to it, and I have mentioned this before, but I do know there may be some concern about certain sections that school board members may want to address. The first has to do, under section B, which is closed meeting, it talks about the authority of school board members. The first section, B1, we're offering an amendment that will clarify what you need to do if you are challenging the motion to go into closed section that is simply pulled out of the Freedom Information Act. That explains how you do that for clarification. Under B3, which is confidentiality of closed meetings, this is a new section that the PRC was proposing. This was also subject to some of the mini retreat issues earlier today. Under this particular section, it will talk about the school board members who access and discuss information materials prepared for or during closed session will maintain all such information in a confidential manner. School board members will not record or copy such confidential information. Unauthorized persons may not be provided access to confidential information. Personal notes taken while preparing for or attending closed meetings should be destroyed as soon as the closed sessions are concluded or should be turned over to school board legal counsel, the school board clerk, or school board legal counsel to maintain in a confidential manner and in accordance with applicable record-keeping requirements. Failure to protect the confidentiality of closed session material or information may constitute sufficient reason to restrict that school board member from participating in future closed sessions or serving on school board committees that handle confidential information. And when it's suggestion there's school board discipline. There are a couple further other sections that we've done. Electronic meetings, communication meetings. I am not going to go back over all of this. We have done this extensively with a couple of other meetings. But again, electronic meetings are when you are all participating or a majority of you are participating electronically and not present. The second section D has to do with remote location participation. We are amending this section to deal with the temporary disabilities. We did not initially adopt this when we adopted the changes in 2014. This section will now clarify how you get to participate if you have a long-term disability or when you are doing a personal matter and you cannot be physically present in that section. And the final section under this would be section 5. The school board members may not participate from a remote location in any closed session. The school board may make exceptions to the restriction regarding closed session participation by a majority vote of the school board or the committee members prior to the beginning of the meeting of closed session. This has also been a concern of some of the school board members wanted to deal with that. And then the final section also talks about conditions regarding remote location participation may be suspended or modified in accordance with the applicable school board action or resolution, governor's action, or Virginia General Assembly action, which is recognizing that there are currently changes going on in the law. That would be the recommendation that the PRC is bringing forward. I do know that a number of school members had some concerns. I don't know if this is something we'd like to further discuss at this time, because we have at least 2 school board members raising their hands, even more than one.
Okay, Mrs. Hughes?
I have a comment on each one. Should we just do the 36 and then put me back in the queue for 38? Okay. I am making a motion on behalf of Ms. Weems to amend bylaw 36. The amendment would be school board members who access or discuss information or materials in preparation for or during closed meetings will maintain all such information in a confidential manner. Personal notes taken while preparing for or during closed meetings will also be maintained in a confidential manner and in accordance with applicable record-keeping guidelines. This may include turning notes over to the clerk of the board or legal counsel. Failure to protect the confidentiality of closed session material will constitute sufficient reason to restrict that school board member from participation in future closed sessions or serving on school board committees that handle confidential items. This is just that it doesn't matter who holds the information, whether it's the person who has the notes or somebody here, but they must be confidential.
For the record, I'll point out that I did hand out copies of the written amendment to the school board members here, and it was emailed to the other school board members who are participating remotely so they can take a look at it.
Madam Chair, point of order. Do we have a motion on the floor to approve the original or before the substitute?
Not yet, we
Okay,
don't.
so
Correct.
I think we need to correct.
So let's put the motion on the floor. We haven't had PRC action items in a while, so we all need a refresher. So let us first put a motion out on the floor for bylaw 136 as proposed by PRC for the sake of discussion. So a motion for bylaw 136 to just, we haven't put it out there. Okay, Mrs. Felton a first and Mrs. Melnick a second. Okay, so with that now, further discussion. And we're discussing.
Well, Mrs. Hughes has offered the substitute. You can't do it you can't do a proxy for Mrs. Weems, or Mrs. Hughes has offered an amendment to this subsection. And so I think she just needs a second on that. So if you're going to treat that as an amendment.
Okay, all right, Mrs. Franklin, a second on the substitute. Section C, we're talking about section 3 of.
Section 3, and this would be, now you're opening discussion on the proposal to amend section 3 to be what was read by Mrs. Hughes, which you have at your seat as an amendment, as a copy of the email that Mrs. Weems had proposed. The suggested language is in there, so that is what's open for debate at the moment.
So, Mrs. Manning?
So I support the amendment, but I have some comments on a different part of the bylaw. So would I need to wait until after we vote on the amendment before I make comments, Ms. Linetti?
I think you need to deal with the substitute just amending this section. That amendment.
But it's not a substitute motion, it would be an amendment, correct? Because a
Correct, you would be
substitute,
amending the initial motion, and then that you would adopt this section as would become the new proposed motion.
amended.
Yeah, and
And
then,
then we address the full bylaw.
yes, at that point, then you go
Okay.
back and make amendment for another
Okay,
section.
I'll wait then until we,
Did you want to comment on this amendment?
no, I just said that I support it.
Okay, that.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Riggs and then Mrs. Melnick.
Okay, I would like to discuss this amendment, but with a caveat. So my thoughts are to amend that. So what do we need to
So
do?
you want a second amendment
Yes,
at this point? So
a
you-
second amendment. And possibly being the, chair of the, PRC, maybe we need to bring it back and speak in the PRC group again before we bring it back. So I'm just recommending that as well. But there's been several people that have mentioned this, my second amendment, and that was, the notes be, turned over, whether it's closed session or whether it's, a discipline committee, be turned back to like our clerk or either our lawyer that's with us in the discipline, and those notes be scanned and put into our SharePoint in a secure folder so we can go into it anytime we needed to. So it would be right there.
Okay. now
I
we
know
talked
Jessica
earlier
mentioned that, and a couple other people did too, so I just wanted to bring that up.
in light of not totally agreeing, but discussing earlier, does anyone want that reduced to writing to look at? So that would be-
Maybe
Can,
a first-
can I just move that we send this back to committee?
And that is actually a higher motion, so I
Yeah.
think you could, that
Okay,
might
I
be, not
move
be a
that-
bad idea.
I move that we send this back to committee. And I second.
Okay.
No, there's more on the, I was gonna,
thought we discussed earlier today that all of our motions
are going to be put in writing, and so the people who are remote are not seeing the writing portion. I don't know if you all are not.
It
So
was,
my motion's on the floor now, so.
and Mrs.
Send it
Anderson,
back.
you are correct, because this was presented to us in the last hour. So by returning it to committee, that resolves your concern. Am I correct?
Not really, because we still have to vote. I think we still have to vote on this particular motion unless the maker of the motion and the second of the motion agrees
actually
that
have
they will withdraw it. Pardon?
all right, what's going on? Mrs. Riggs did not get a second to her motion, so Mrs. Manning's motion has come in. It's a privileged motion. She's recommending that it be sent back to the Policy Review Committee for further consideration. Mrs. Riggs actually seconded that motion, so the motion on the floor is to return this bylaw to Policy Review to consider the various comments that have been made both earlier today and now in email. So the motion on the floor is to return bylaw 136 to the Policy Review Committee for further consideration. And that was seconded, so that's the vote at this point. That's not debatable at this point. That's the vote you're going to go ahead and take a vote on.
So does that need a formal vote?
Yes.
Okay, but before, so we'll defer any further discussion on other parts of the bylaw pending it, or did anybody?
The whole bylaw is gone if you vote, right? You have to vote on this motion. The whole bylaw is gone, but you're certainly welcome to send any further comments or to speak with me or Mrs. Riggs or send them in to us. And Policy Review meets in 2 weeks and we can take that up.
So the motion that's been seconded is to return bylaw, wait, let me get it
136.
straight. Bylaw 136, opening meetings and closed meetings, back to PRC for further review. Please all show your approval with a raised hand, those who are in favor.
Ms. Holtz, how do you vote? Madam,
I'm sure of the vote. I'm listening, but I'm not hearing. Could you read it again?
The motion on the floor that was seconded is to take the entire bylaw 136 and return it to the Policy Review Committee to consider the comments they've heard both today and earlier in the mini retreat.
Okay, I agree.
okay, thank you. Madam Chair, we have the motion passed with 10 ayes, so the motion did pass.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that would then bring bylaw 138, regular meetings to the floor. Do you want to get a motion to discuss this in a second?
Yes. Motion for bylaw 138. Mrs. Felton, thank you. A second. Mrs. Franklin. Okay, discussion.
138, we've mentioned this before, this is regular meetings, time and place, order of business, recess meetings, and work sessions. The school board has, we brought this back and forth to you several times already, but the recommendation from policy review after we brought it back the last time is will now read decisions regarding how school board meetings are conducted. When school board bylaws, policies, regulations, or applicable law or regulation do not adequately address how school board meetings are conducted, or when insufficient time is available for the school board as a whole to take action before such meeting, the chair, clerk, or superintendent or their designees are authorized to make reasonable and necessary decisions regarding how such meetings are to be prepared and conducted, subject to review by the school board. And it was suggested at, class, I can't remember which last meeting we brought this back, there was a suggestion to add that last line, subject to review by the school board. That was the difference between the last time you saw it and now that you're seeing. That's what back to PRC, and that has come back before you.
Discussion. Any Zoom questions? All right then, yes, ma'am. Oh, Mrs. Hughes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was back in the queue for this night. So part of 38 was that remote participation for closed sessions can be decided on a case-by-case basis. Was that?
It's 136.
Oh, that was still in 36? Never mind. Sorry.
All right, so this bylaw 138 is on the floor to be approved. Please show your approval with a raised hand.
Ms. Holtz, how do you vote? Ms. Anderson, how do you vote? Is her hand up?
My hand is raised.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. We have the motion passes with 10 ayes.
For those who have made comments on bylaw 136, I have gathered those. I will take them to PRC, but if you have more comments, and I'm aware of what we talked about during the mini retreat, that if there's anything further, please refer it to either me and Mrs. Riggs, and we'll get it to policy review.
Thank you, Mrs. Linetti. Action item C, 2020 to 2025 Local Plan for Gifted Education, Gifted Testing Amendment. A motion to approve. Mrs. Riggs, a second. Mrs. Hughes. All right, for discussion, we have Dr. DeVries with us. Welcome.
Good evening. So I'm here to seek approval this evening to a change in gifted testing that is necessary to be able to move forward. Oh, there we go. There's my slides. Nope, maybe not. That's okay. Those are my slides for the next time I'm up here.
You can do the interim financial report.
You don't want me to do that. Okay, yep, I sure will. So I'm here this evening to seek approval to a change in gifted testing that's necessary to be able to move forward the gifted identification and ODS selection process under the unique circumstances of this year. In September, the school board approved the local plan for gifted education, and included in this plan is a description of the gifted assessments that the school division uses. Since this plan is school board approved, in order to make a change to what was identified in the plan for the testing format, it's necessary to return to you as a board to seek approval for a change to what was previously approved. So I'd just like to acknowledge the members of the gifted administrative team, Dr. Dornsuelo Wilkins-McCurry, Ms. Angela Bubu-Haropoulos, and Dr. Ardeen Bunch, who have worked tirelessly to develop a plan to best meet the needs of the VBCPS gifted program at this time. As outlined in the Gifted Education Local Plan, the screening tool that is used for gifted education is the Naglieri screening tool. This assessment is administered to all 1st and 5th grade students in a traditional year. This year, due to the condensed timeline of students not returning to school until later in the fall, revisions to the testing process have been necessary. 5th grade students who apply this year will be administered the COGAT assessment as they typically are, but the Naglieri assessment will not be administered. We are seeking approval to change the screening tool for grade 1 students from the Naglieri to the COGAT screener. We typically administer the Naglieri screening tool in person using a paper and pencil format. The shift to the COGAT screener will allow for both in-person and remote administration of the screener so that we may accommodate option 2 students who are learning from home. Regardless of whether the student takes the assessment in person or remotely, all students will take the assessment online. For all other gifted applicants in grades 2 through 11, we are seeking approval to use just the online COGAT full test rather than administering both the Naglieri and the COGAT as outlined in the gifted plan. So to recap, we're seeking approval for 2 changes to the assessment tools that we use for gifted identification. First, to shift the universal screening tool for 1st grade students from the Naglieri screener to the COGAT screener. And second, for gifted applicants in grades 2 through 11, to shift from administering both the Naglieri screener and the full COGAT assessment to administering just the full COGAT assessment. After considering all the possibilities, the gifted administrative team feels that this change is the best path forward for gifted identification this year. It will allow the option 2 students to access testing remotely and also provide the flexibility for option 1 students, to access the test in person if we're in an in-person learning situation, or remotely if we find ourselves in a virtual learning environment, without disruption to the testing and identification timeline. In addition, the Naglieri screener, while offered online, does not provide a platform in which the testing administrator can see, hear, and communicate with students as they test remotely. The COGAT screener and full COGAT test are both housed on platforms that do have this capability. The testing administrator's ability to see, hear, and communicate with students who are testing remotely will help maintain the integrity and security of the testing session. Finally, while we have moved the application deadlines back to provide families with more time to submit gifted applications, we are not able to move any other components of the identification and ODS selection timeline back. This is because there are staffing and scheduling implications associated with both gifted identification and ODS selection that will ultimately impact all elementary and middle schools. As a result, we will be working on a condensed timeline. The COGAT online administration provides test results nearly right away, cutting down the time it would traditionally take to hand score and norm thousands of assessments. Thank you for your consideration of approving these proposed changes to the gifted testing tools that we use as part of the identification process. It's worth noting that I have discussed this change with the members of the Gifted Community Advisory Committee and have their support for the revisions that we have proposed. I'm available to answer any questions you have.
Okay, Mrs. Melnick?
So because of the ease of that COGAT test, do you ever see like a shift in the future of getting rid of the Naglieri test and shifting solely to that? And is there that much of a difference that that it's not going to matter? Obviously we need it. And I like the honor lock feature actually. So, but
yes, and I don't know. It depends on how testing goes this year. I mean, if testing is seamless, it certainly cuts down on time for not just screening, but also for scoring, which is really what takes a great deal of our testing specialist time. So we'll have to see how it goes, and then obviously compare our data as we've administered it this way versus how we've administered it in the past.
okay, well I guess you'll wait to see the results because I wonder, would somebody do better on the one test than the other, and it might skew that child's chance. But you'll let us know.
Yeah, I mean, and the beauty of it is that by providing the consistency across the board is that we're not going to have some students taking one assessment and some students taking another, so that we cut down on that potential bias or skewing of the data.
And Mrs. Manning?
So can you bring me up to speed on where we are with the process? Because I know that this has been a difficult process with everyone being remote. Do we already have all of the application process done except for the testing? I mean, have parents and teachers have already done their part?
Sure. So application deadline for grades 2 onward have already 2 through 8 has already passed. That was January 18th, I believe. And so those applications are in. So based on those students who have applied, they will then move forward with the COGAT assessment. The screening has not yet occurred for grade 1 students. So once that screening happens, as is typical in our process, we will then, based on that screening, students will then apply, and then based on those applications, we'll provide the full assessment of the COGAT. So the screening tool that we typically use, the Naglieri, as I said, it had an online feature, and we were hopeful that maybe we could use it, but it didn't allow for any kind of communication between the proctor and the students taking the test. And as you can imagine, that would be very difficult with 6-year-olds. So we didn't really feel like we can go that route. We did, prior to closing, screen roughly 900 students using the Naglieri. And then schools closed, so everything came to a halt. So as part of the decision, when we were making decisions regarding the process, we decided that we will now rescreen those students as well, so that the teacher will just screen all first grade students at each school. This way we're looking at the similar data across the board.
So the first graders are going to be, their deadline's going to be different than typical years.
Their deadline is actually pretty much the same as typical years. That's what's condensing the testing so much.
Okay.
We did push their deadline back by a week. And so I think it was due, the applications were due for first graders on February 11th, and now they're due February 17th, or they were around about that.
Okay.
So February 17th is the deadline for applications for first graders.
Okay. And then so the cost, I see that there's about a $34,000 increase. That's for the difference in the Naglieri and the COGAT. I mean,
Yeah.
I assume it's more with all the extra features that.
Well, not only that, but we have purchased the Naglieri, and now we have to
okay.
purchase the COGAT as the screening test. We usually make those purchases, the year prior or the summer prior to prepare for the testing year.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments before we vote? Miss Owens, you go ahead.
Thank you. Just for my understanding,
In years past, have we used both test or screening tools, and this year we're just going to use the one, or have students previously done it in either or?
So it depends on what grade. So for first grade, in years past, our screening tool, which means we screened every student in that grade level that we've used, was the Naglieri. And then for those, after that screening tool took place, there's the application process. And then for those students who chose to apply based on that screening, we then use the full battery COGAT test to test them for gifted identification. So the identification committee, in essence, saw the Naglieri screening tool assessment data and the COGAT full battery assessment data. What we're proposing is that this year we do the COGAT screener, which we have not given in previous years, so they'll still see those two scores of what they scored in the first part of the COGAT screener, and then again after they apply, they'll be then administered the full battery of the COGAT.
Gotcha. If there was a reason in previous years that we hadn't chosen to use the same Kodak screener and Kodak test, why we liked one over the other?
Yeah, so it's a matter of availability. So when the COGAT screener has become available versus the Naglieri, which had been widely used, I will tell you that the Naglieri screener focuses all on nonverbal skills, whereas the COGAT screener focuses on a variety of skills, both verbal and nonverbal, quantitative and representational. So it looks at a little bit of a different angle, but we don't suspect that that will be an issue at all. But the COGAT screener itself, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure if it was available. We've used the Naglieri for a very long time.
Gotcha. Thank you for helping me understand that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So just to confirm, the COGAT is more broad-based.
The COGAT is, it assesses multiple skills across
So
multiple.
if you only had one to use, I would think we would use the broad-based one rather than the other that limits it to one skill set over another.
And that'll be
one aptitude over another.
Sure, and that'll be
whatever.
interesting to see, to compare data from previous years to this. I will tell you that some school divisions use both. For an ESL student, perhaps the Naglieri, which is more nonverbal, might be a better assessment, but it might not because we've never used the COGAT screener. So it'll be interesting to see this year.
Okay, anybody else? Our Zoom crew is good? All right, then with that, this action item to approve this gifted testing amendment to the previously approved 2025 local plan for gifted education. All in favor, show a raised hand, please.
Ms. Owens, how do you vote?
Sorry, my hand is raised. I vote yes.
Thank you. The motion passed with 10 votes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again, you and your team. Okay. All right, action item D, School Board Committee Assignment Modifications for term ending June 30th, 2021. So as was previously conveyed, there were a number of openings that arose by virtue of the recent election back in November, and a few other members asked to be removed from certain present commitments. So with that, I'll just quickly recap the proposed assignments for the openings that had resulted in the order that they appear on the committee assignment sheet that was provided. So internal audit, the replacement, Mrs. Franklin. Policy review, the replacement, Mrs. Hughes. Legislative, the replacement, Mrs. Manning. Student discipline, there were just two adjustments here. We have for Discipline Committee 1 that meets on Mondays at 3 p.m. Replacement of the addition of Mrs. Franklin. And Ms. Owens is now listed for Committee 2, meeting Tuesdays at 8:30 a.m. The rest of the disciplinary assignments remain intact. CIP Modernization Review Committee, all replacements, member Dottie Holtz, member Mrs. Manning, with the chair appointment as this chair's appointment for her to chair this committee. This is one committee that's appointed by the school board chair, the chair, and Mrs. Anderson is the alternate. The 403B Plan Oversight Committee that was developed in the past year, the internal committee of staff members and a single voting board member, Mrs. Manning to replace the previous member. Green Run Collegiate Charter Board, Mrs. Melnick and Mrs. Franklin as alternate. The next replacement is Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities, Mrs. Manning, with Mrs. Riggs remaining as alternate. what we know as the WHRO, Educational Advisory Committee, Regional Committee, the replacement of Mrs. Manning with Mrs. Franklin serving as alternate. The 457 Deferred Compensation Board, which is a board, an outside board with city council, and this does require city council approval. Replacement, Mrs. Anderson. The Human Rights Commission, Mrs. Franklin added as an alternate, with Dottie Holt, Mrs. Holtz remaining the liaison. Special Ed Advisory, Mrs. Franklin added as alternate. And the Gifted Advisory Committee, Community Advisory Committee for Gifted Education, Mrs. Franklin added as the replacement, with Mrs. Hughes remaining the alternate. The Interagency Adult Basic Ed Advisory Committee, this is affiliated with the Adult Learning Center, and this Mrs. Hughes' replacement with Mrs. Melnick as alternate. And finally, the School Health, oh, my screen, bear with me. This was up to the last one. The School Health Advisory Committee, Mrs. Hughes being added as an alternate, serving as an alternate to Mrs. Weems, the present liaison. So with that, I just want to recap and say that, you know, in consultation with the vice chair, our guiding goal with this proposal was to come up, was a proposal that does serve the needs of the collective board. A concerted effort was also made to provide a better balance of responsibility among all 11 members. We believe it serves that purpose. And with that, I will entertain a motion to approve. Mrs. Hughes, a second. Mrs. Riggs, discussion.
Did you motion? Okay, I wanted to make sure.
Okay, Mrs. Manning.
Yeah, I would like to discuss how the committee assignments were distributed, Madam Chair. I specifically asked for 2 committees. I asked for, as far as the school board standing committees, which I believe makes the most impact because we do have voting ability to make decisions. And I asked for the audit committee. As you know, I have experience on that committee. Our bylaws kind of lay out how committees are supposed to be assigned. And it's given A through I approximately 8 items that should be considered when assigning and approving committee assignments. I believe that during this process for me, there were at least 5 items that were not considered. You know, I was put on the legislative committee. I was not asked if I wanted to be on the legislative committee. I was put on 3 other committees that I was not asked if I wanted to be on those committees. Some of the things that should be considered when appointing and recommending to committees is expressed interest of the school board member, experience as a school board member training and experience with the purpose of the committee, continuity of service, availability of meetings. So, you know, especially with expressed interest and availability of meetings, it wasn't even discussed with me if I could serve on these committees that I did not request. I don't know when these committees meet. I don't know if I have availability for them. So I'm quite disappointed that I wasn't even consulted prior to being put on these committees. That's not what our bylaws say. That's not how our bylaws dictate how committees should be assigned. So, you know, I'm pretty upset about that. And an audit, you know, for some reason, and I'm not sure why you won't let me know that, Ms. Rye, some reason you don't want me on that committee. Maybe I asked too many questions, but it's my understanding that I'm the only one that specifically requested the audit committee. And while I believe Ms. Franklin will do a good job, I definitely have more experience. I expressed interest. So for that reason, I can't support the committee assignments.
So My comments are just, there were others who expressed interest in audit, just to be clear, but that we do feel we did consider all those factors. And again, I get back to that we look at this collectively. And so that's the answer to that. Now, I did respond back to you to the best that I could with the meeting dates and times, like one of them is more of on an as-needed basis, legislative committee, but we're all pretty familiar with their schedule. And I shared with you one of the other, the board and how often that meets, the 403B board.
I'm not familiar with how often most of the committees that I've been assigned to meet when they meet. It does appear most of them don't meet very often, so, I'm willing to try to make it work. For most of them, I'm probably not going to be able to do all of them. I'll have to figure out when they meet, so that information in advance of assigning board members to those committees and consulting with board members who you're assigning committees to, I think would be appropriate. So I will have to hopefully you'll give me more information on when these committees meet. I mean, last year I was assigned to a committee. I asked twice when it met. I was told that a staff member would be reaching out to me. I never attended the meetings because I never knew when they met or even what the committee was.
And that was a break in communication with that school, I understand. But I did write back with, again, the quarterly nature of two of those boards, and then the legislative, you have the most immediate chair here for that. But
again, it was after you had already assigned me to something. You didn't even consult with me on my schedule or my interest.
Your comments are noted. Thank you. Mrs. Franklin?
I just wanted to clarify. Did I miss an email about how often they do meet and the frequency? And was that posted and I missed that?
Oh, remember, I spoke to your question by phone to say that was something that we would ask the clerk moving forward to compile, but it was it's a pretty comprehensive list, and it was, this January month there just wasn't right.
Okay, but I didn't miss
and that's the understanding, and even the new committee procedures, it's actually in that appendix now that these, to the extent possible, the meetings will be posted on the committee website page. Again, for the, some are more straightforward, like policy review is what Mrs. Riggs says. It's the second Thursday of the month, for example. Others meet quarterly, but maybe they don't spell out their dates well. I don't, some may spell them out all at once, and some it may be one meeting at a time that it's announced. So there is some variance, but I think it's a reasonable request to the clerk, and I plan to do it after we got through these weekly meetings in January, that we do put together a comprehensive list to the extent that we can for our own internal reference as well.
Because just to Ms. Manning's point, I mean, I just want to make sure that, if we are assigned to the committees, that what happens then if you have a conflict? You just, and I'm sorry, I know this is just my ignorance, but what happens if you have a conflict and are unable to attend one of the meetings? Is there a possibility of rescheduling the meeting or?
There's alternate for the cases that have alternates, but certainly that's something in committee meetings that are discussed. If you announce ahead, a conflict developed with the next month's meeting, and generally committees can be, they're flexible to the extent they can be. It depends on staff availability too.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? No, all right, so all in favor of this proposal, kindly display a raised hand.
Ms. Owens, how do you vote? Is it there? I can't see it.
I'm a yes. Sorry, I'm not.
Thank you.
hand raising is showing up on the thing, but I'm a yes.
We have 8 yeses. We just have to vote in
So
the,
all opposed, please show by raised hand.
Did you have 9 yeses the first time?
Ms. Hughes, how did you vote? Thank you. So we had 9 yeses and 1 no in Miss Manning. So the motion did pass.
Okay, thank you. Information, we have this nice thick packet here. And we have, well, it looks like we're welcoming Miss Crystal Pate. And this is report on the comprehensive annual finance report, otherwise known as, I'll let you say the acronym.
The CAFR. Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He should be virtual. His name is Greg Bussink. He is a principal with the accounting firm of Clifton Larson Allen. He is our external auditing firm, and he will report out on our CAFR and also our audit results for fiscal year 2020.
And you can find the right time to note that.
All right, so you ready?
Welcome, this is Carolyn Rye on behalf of the school board. We welcome you this evening.
Oh, hey, well, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Bussink. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen. I'll say CLA to make it easier. So I'm here tonight to present the results of our financial statement audit for the school system. So I'm happy to say that we issued an unmodified opinion. That's also known as a clean opinion on the CAFR. So the CAFR is a comprehensive annual financial report. It's 258 pages. So it's not an easy read. So there's a lot of information there. So usually at this point, if I was there in person, I would hold up a copy of the CAFR and show you how big it is. Because we're 258 pages. It's quite a comprehensive amount of information, a lot of different things included in there. So when you have a chance, take a look through it. One thing I will point out that if you're strapped for time, take a look at the management's discussion and analysis and the transmittal. Those are the first couple sections of the report. And what they do is they provide you an overview of what the financial statements include. So to give you an idea of what the schools do, how you did it, and the results of operation, and it's in a shorter, condensed version rather than going through the full package if you're tight on time. I want to thank everyone for their assistance this year. So management, accounting and finance, internal audit, budget, program folks, superintendent, everyone supported us through the process. This year was a challenging year for our business and for the school system, for sure. We performed pretty much all the work remotely this year. When I met with the audit committee back in December, I made a comment. I said that this year's approach, well, we kind of encountered the perfect storm. So we had the pandemic working with us, so we had to work remotely. It was a little bit of a challenge for the school system, but I think they did a really good job as far as providing us information. So we were lucky that you guys have made good investments in technology and that we didn't have any issues as far as exchanging data, didn't experience any real delays in getting information. At the same time, the pandemic hits. We also have the school system going through a new system implementation, or at least a major upgrade. So a lot of time and effort involved with that. And in addition to that, there's a new compliance supplement this year that caused a delay in completing the single audit. So we were able to get the CAFR done, which is a set of financial statements and all the notes and additional information. But the overall single audit that's performed with the city to say it's significant CARES money that they spent, we weren't able to finish that. We're actually working on finishing that now. The compliance supplement was issued by OMB in late December. So we're hoping to wrap that up as soon as we can. So one thing that's important to note within your CAFR package is there's 2 awards that the school system has received over time, and for multiple years, it's the GFOA Certificate of Excellence and the ASBO certificate. Those are both industry standard kind of best practice documents that shows that the CAFR meets certain standards of quality and readability, and certain information needs to be included. So that's kind of the feather in the cap of management for their hard work and everything they put in there. So when you look at the CAFR, you'll see that it's representation of management. So of the 258 pages or so, we provide them 5 pages. We give them our opinion on the financial statements, which I mentioned was unmodified or clean. And we also give them a report on internal control of compliance with laws and regulations. And I'm happy to say that report had no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses identified. So no significant internal control things were identified. So that's also kind of a feather in the cap of management and the board for all their hard work. So I mentioned that we met with the board back in December, and we shared the same results with them, answered some questions for them, and went into detail. We made some required communications that I'll kind of summarize now, but I did mention it was an unmodified opinion. I mentioned that there were no significant findings, no delays in performing the work, no issues where management pushed back on us for trying to do certain procedures. They were very helpful and cooperative. We had no adjustments through our process. We didn't identify any adjustments that were required within the financial statement. So those are kind of the key things that I wanted to point out to everyone tonight, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Mrs. Melnick?
So as Greg mentioned, he did present this to the audit committee, and I think the most notable comment, and he didn't make it tonight, was the perfect storm comment, right, Ms. Fate? Like, it was, we had all of this happen, yet everything was just great. 258 pages of good reading, and we were all very pleased in that committee.
Mrs. Manning?
Yeah, when will we be getting a copy of the CAFR? Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Pate or staff, anybody want to add any further commentary?
No, other than we should be really proud of our department. It's just really exceptional. Thank you for all your hard work.
Yes, please
Yes,
pass
please
that on
pass
to
that on to the entire department on our behalf. Okay. All right. Well, we thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So round B for you, yes, and interim financial statements, November, December 2020.
Never turned this on before. Okay, good evening again, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairman Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence. In your board documents this evening are the November and December 2020 interim financial statements. This presentation is going to focus on the financial position as of December 31st, 2020. Our first graph shows you that our overall revenue trend year-to-date through December remains acceptable. We received the governor's amended 2020-2022 biennial budget on December 16th. Among the key recommendations in the governor's amendments impacting the school division for fiscal year 21 include an increase in our sales tax estimate of about $5 million. This revised estimate is still about $4 million less than our original budget for sales tax. There's also state funding for a no-loss program or a hold harmless, and that's for the reduced enrollment anticipation, and that came in at approximately $17.1 million. There's a reduction of $2 million in the one-time COVID-19 local relief payment, and that was adopted during the special session of the General Assembly. This reduction is due because of the higher updated sales tax projection. There were some other minor technical adjustments to various SOQ, incentive, categorical, and lottery-funded programs. So some of you have heard this before. The increase in the sales tax estimate means that that additional $5 million in sales tax the state is estimating we will receive. That does reduce the amount that is in the basic aid formula. And due to the effects of the division's composite rate index, the division loses roughly 60 cents for every dollar gain in sales tax receipts. So that resulted in a reduction in basic aid of approximately $3 million. So based on the governor's proposed amendments and a projection of the March 31st ADM, we are currently projecting a surplus in state revenue of approximately $11.5 million. As you know, the General Assembly can amend the governor's budget proposals during the current session, which is scheduled to end February 27th. So these are projections, and at the conclusion of the session, the Virginia Department of Education will provide updated projected payments based on final General Assembly actions, and then final payments will be updated and finalized based on our March 31st ADM sometime in the May and June timeframe. Our federal revenues are showing an acceptable trend. We have received impact aid payments of approximately $5.3 million through the month of December. Other sources of revenue through the month of December continue to lag behind prior year. We talked a little bit about this at the last presentation on interims. We're seeing decreases in our revenues in areas such as the sale of salvage material and vehicles. Our summer school tuition was down due to the pandemic. There was some delay in receipt of our CSEP rental, but we have received the first semester, and the second semester progress billing is in place. Our overall facility rental is down since we're not renting out to external organizations in the past, and we're seeing a decrease in the Stop Arm Enforcement Program revenue due, of course, to less buses and less people on the road. This next graph shows that sales tax receipts are at an acceptable level. Year to date through December, we are approximately 1.3 million higher than the same time last year. For January, we are showing an increase in sales tax receipts from January of last year of approximately $230,000. Our last graph shows the expenditures and encumbrances trend is also acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions the board may have.
You mentioned the CSEP rental facility, so that's not included in the line item of
That is not.
facility
The first
rental?
semester was billed out, and we received it on January 7th. And when I checked with school rentals, they are in the process of billing out the second semester.
But that does fall under this line item
Yes,
here
you're
of
cor-
rental
yes,
facilities, so
ma'am.
that will go, do you know approximately?
It was
how
about
much?
$82,500 is the first
Okay.
semester.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else in person or Zoom? All right, as always, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have Mr. Delaney on board. These presentations were deferred from our last meeting. So welcome, sir. We look forward to hearing about these new courses and textbooks.
Thank you, and good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. Tonight's presentation proposes updating the dual enrollment offerings for students in the Entrepreneurial and Business Academy at Kempsville High School. In addition, we'd like to recommend the addition of an African American history elective course for our high school students. An associate's degree in business from TCC is the flagship opportunity at the Entrepreneurship and Business Academy. 17 students in the EBA class of 2020 earned an associate's degree upon graduating from Kempsville High School. 22 students are on track this year, and we intend to see that number continue to expand each year. TCC has recently updated the course makeup of this degree program to meet current trends and industry demands. The new degree plan adds Business 100 and Business 117 and removes 3 courses. To continue to offer students the opportunity to complete this degree, we must also update our course offerings. The 2 proposed courses are new requirements for the associate's degree and offer students a chance to explore the topics of business and leadership while they hone their critical thinking and business communication skills. There's no budget impact for adding these courses as they replace outdated courses in the program. As you may know, in August of 2019, Governor Northam announced the Virginia Department of Education would work collaboratively with Virtual Virginia and WHRO Public Media, as well as committees of history and social science public school educators, university historians, and college professors to develop a new African American history course for high school students. In July of this year, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dr. James Lane, notified school divisions of the opportunity to present the course the new elective during the current 2021 academic year. Currently, 16 school divisions across the Commonwealth are offering this course. This elective course will challenge students to examine the African American experience by surveying African American history from pre-colonial Africa through today. It introduces students to key concepts in African American history, from early beginnings in Africa through the transatlantic slave trade, the Civil War, emancipation, Reconstruction, the Civil Rights era, into the present. Utilizing the content provided by the VDOE online modules and selecting resources gathered by the collaboration groups, we will provide a course that is rooted in historical thinking skills. Students will develop skills to investigate, research, analyze, and synthesize evidence from primary, rich, and secondary sources. It is of vital importance in this course that students are taught to determine credible and valid sources of information, identify and make comparisons using multiple perspectives, understand the context, and recognize that events occur in a specific point in time, as well as have opportunities to explore more deeply areas of interest in making connections to local history. There's a small budgetary impact with this course offering. Teachers will have essential professional development opportunities in June. Additionally, the VDOE is planning for staff development. They'll be informed by the feedback they receive from teachers who piloted the state-developed course. It is anticipated that this will result in an estimated expenditure of $3,900 for the budget in July of 2021. There is no textbook currently recommended for this course. Thank you for your time this evening and for your consideration of these proposed courses. At this time, I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Laney. A detailed description. Interested in the African American course that you'll be teaching. Will there be a particular book for this course, or is it just online or things they put together from Governor Nordstrom recommendation?
There is no recommended textbook at this time. There are several resources that have been put together through the VDOE and through the collaboration groups. They're going to modify and look at those resources after this year. But at this time, the online modules are the other resource that they're looking. There's 6 online modules that the teacher would have access to and be trained in as well.
Okay. Will we be able to have access to that, to see those modules? Are they available now?
I have not been able to see them now. We've asked for access to review those. What they're working through right now is with those pilot schools to see how they're going to modify those modules. But I'm certain once that course is finalized into this year, we should be able to have access to those modules.
Okay. If it's anything close to what WHRO presented 2 years ago, it would be very sustainable, very resourceful as well, especially when you talk about the pre-colonial from that time up to present. But if we do get those, or if that is accessible to us, is there any way of letting us know? Because I definitely want to look at.
Yes, and if you look at your information packet, it does outline the topics of those 6 modules. I'm looking at them now, talking about race and racism, ancestral Africa, and the Atlantic world, so you can see what the current topics are. But in my conversations through my coordinators, they're looking at how they're going to modify those modules moving forward into the next year, due to it being a pilot year this year.
Okay. It's interesting that, well, it's encouraging that we are looking at those concerns, but I'm just also as interested in the material that's going to go with those, see if they coincide with where we're trying to go and what it represents. So thank you. I'm looking forward to it come to fruition.
I'd like to take a class. I guess I can't, but I'd love to.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yeah, I just out of curiosity, you said the introduction to business will be replacing an outdated course. What outdated courses are going away?
So there was 3 courses that were involved previously in that program. One was a geography class, which the Kempsville students now take through AP Human Geography. There was a fitness walking class that was one that they obviously no longer is necessary, and there was an international relations course.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else on these particular? So this is information today, yes, sir?
Yes, it
Right?
is.
So any questions that develop, colleagues can, as always, follow up with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess we're switching now to Dr. DeVries, and then we'll be coming back to you.
Yes, I'll be back in a few moments. Thank you.
Don't go far.
I will not.
So Dr. DeVries, welcome again, and now you're here for, to present textbook adoptions for foreign languages.
I am. Good evening again. I'm here this evening to present multiple textbooks for the Textbook Adoption Committee selections for AP World Language courses. The textbooks recommended for consideration are scheduled for implementation in the fall of 2021. Before presenting our recommendations, I'd like to thank Kelly Arbel, our World Languages Coordinator, and committee members for dedicating their time and efforts in choosing the best textbooks for our students. The 4 courses presented to you this evening for textbook adoption are AP French and Language Culture, AP German Language and Culture, AP Spanish Language and Culture, and AP Spanish Literature and Culture. Before we discuss each of the 4 courses, I would like to just briefly review the textbook adoption process, which is modeled after the Department of Education's textbook procurement process. The first step in the process is to research open education resources to see if there are any out there for use, and if so, if they are aligned to the standards, comprehensive to serve as a primary resource, and of high quality. We also research what other school divisions across the state are using as part of this initial step. If a suitable OER is found, and the committee agrees that this is the best resource for the course, the text is put out for public and teacher review, and then brought before the school board for approval. If a suitable OER is not found, then the committee proceeds with a request for proposal, or RFP, or a bid for textbooks from traditional textbook companies if the cost is over $30,000. Once the RFP or bid time period has expired, the committee proceeds with reviewing textbooks for quality, alignment, and comprehensiveness. At this point, the committee narrows its choices to 2 to present to the school board. The top 2 choices are put out for public and teacher review, and then brought to the board for approval. The first step in the textbook adoption process is always to do a thorough search for OERs. In this case, there were not any OERs found that were aligned to the College Board curriculum framework for these courses. In addition, the online digital resources that are offered as part of the textbook packages by publishers for the 4 courses you're about to hear about tonight provide added resources to help students prepare for the AP exams, as well as assist with their practice in all 4 domains critical to language acquisition: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. For these reasons, OERs were not considered a viable alternative for these AP language courses. Following the search for OERs, the committee did move forward to review textbooks. The following are the committee's recommendations for AP World Language textbook adoption. The AP French Language and Culture Committee has selected TEM 2nd edition and the AP French Language and Culture Exam Prep Work Text by Vista Higher Learning. This text aligns to the thematic course content and skills as set forth by College Board. It also includes ample opportunities for AP exam practice, as well as balances that approach with multiple enrichment experiences in the 4 domains of communication, reading, writing, and listening. The online platform seamlessly works with student Chromebooks and integrates with ClassLink. The current book for this course has been in use for 8 years. The initial cost of this textbook for the 100 students enrolled in AP French Language and Culture is just over $21,000, with a total implementation cost for 6 years of approximately $24,700. The AP German Language and Culture Committee has selected Neue Blickwinkel 2nd edition by Wayside Publishing as its first choice. This text aligns to the new thematic course content set forth by College Board. It also has a strong cultural component, in addition to ample opportunities for students to practice reading, writing, listening, and speaking the language. The supplementary videos and reference tools will benefit students as they prepare to take the AP exam. The current book for this course has been in use for 8 years. The initial implementation for this book would cost $5,382, with the cost of just over $6,000 for the life of the 6-year adoption. The AP Spanish Language and Culture Committee has selected Temas, second edition, and AP Spanish Language and Culture exam preparation work text by Vista Higher Learning as its first choice. This text also aligns to the new thematic course content and skills by College Board, and it includes a strong AP exam prep component that emphasizes all parts of the AP exam. The online resources integrate with ClassLink for ease of student and teacher access. The current book for this course has been in use for 8 years. The initial implementation costs for this textbook is $59,661 for 275 enrolled students. The total implementation cost over 6 years is $68,610. And finally, the AP Spanish Literature and Culture Committee has recommended Intrigas, third edition by Vista Higher Learning as its first choice. In addition to this resource being aligned to the College Board framework for this course, it provides numerous opportunities to learn about the Spanish culture, think critically, and analyze text. Students will have access to AP-style practice activities and assessments. The current book for this course has been in use for 8 years. The initial implementation course for this resource is just over $3,000 for a student enrollment of 20 with a cost of $3,701 for 6 years. So the total cost for this adoption of world languages will be $89,757 for the first year and just over $103,000 total for a 6-year adoption. Thank you for your consideration of the committee's recommendations. And I have with me this evening Kelly Arbel, the World Languages Coordinator, and we welcome any questions you may have.
Okay, colleagues. Mrs. Manning and then Mrs. Melnick.
Yeah, just a question on the textbooks. So it looks like I'll just take the Spanish language one, for example. It says student edition plus online access. So is every student getting a textbook and having online access?
Correct, yes.
So I'm just curious, I mean, I love students being able to have a textbook, but do they all use a textbook?
I think it varies by school. We do have a high usage in our AP classes in general for textbooks, more so than in some of our non-AP courses. I will tell you that in most instances, the bundle, which is the textbook plus the online access, is less or the same cost as just the online access.
Wow.
So it's worth it.
They're robbing us.
This comes up every year.
I know. It's just, it doesn't make, I mean, I understand, but I just wish we could find an alternative, but there's a monopoly, I think. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Melnick.
Just out of curiosity, when you put a textbook out for review, how often do you hear from a member of the public?
Not very often.
Okay.
Mrs. Franklin.
I just have one question. What is the reason for the cost difference? There's a pretty high cost difference between some of these adoptions. French and Spanish, to be sure. And I'm just curious, is it just the amount of students that are enrolled in those courses?
Yeah, and generally you'll notice that on a couple of these books, they're from the same publisher. So generally the costs are the same, if not similar, if not completely the same. And so, you'll notice that some of the more popular courses, like our Spanish courses, have 200 students in them. So that's a very high, versus some of our courses that have 20 students.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what I just made clear
AP
on.
course textbooks are generally pretty expensive.
Thank you.
So Dr. DeVries, just went in and out of my head, had to do with Mrs. Franklin. Students, so when they put together these price packages, so textbooks, it's per book, obviously. And then is it a per student fee in terms of online access?
So when it's bundled, you would get a textbook, a hard copy, and then a 6-year online access. So technically, for every book you get 6 years, 6 students that can get the online access, if that makes sense.
So that the online access is associated with each textbook?
Correct.
Which you could say is per student, but you're saying it could be more than one. That's up to 6 different students can access online with that one textbook association?
There's only one student per year that can access that, that license. And so when we purchase
that
something.
makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we purchase a bundle for, let's say, $200, just for the sake of throwing a number out there, you get the one textbook that can be used every year, by a different student each year for 6 years. And then you also get, with that textbook that's associated with it, 6 online licenses. So 1 per year for each student.
That's what that means. Okay, but to add up to the 6 years. The Tallwood,
Madam Chair, may I speak?
You're in the queue, Mrs. Anderson.
Global Studies Academy, do they use these, or would they use these, or do they have their own thing going on there?
It depends. They have a lot of different classes than we offer, related to culture and that kind of stuff. But if it's an AP class, if they offer an AP language, French language and culture class, then their students would more than likely use that book as well.
So your numbers, obviously, Tallwood has its own mainstream or in-zone student population, but it's possible that some of these numbers could include Tallwood Global Studies students who have signed up for one of these AP world language.
When we run the numbers, we run the numbers of whatever school offers those classes across the district.
Thank you. So we have Mrs. Hughes and then Mrs. Anderson. Oh, okay, sounds good. Mrs. Anderson, go ahead.
So I'm wondering about the textbook fund. So we've referred to that in the past. Is this new money that needs to be allocated, or is there money in the textbook fund already there? So I'm not sure who could answer that, but maybe Dr. Spence.
So the money, we're not asking for allocations of the money. The textbook fund, we budget each year for anticipation of textbook needs. So the money is already encumbered in that.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you. Mrs. Hughes? Mine are more.
So I found it interesting that the AP students use actual books more. Nothing replaces reading a book. I focus more reading a book than I do online. But my other thing is, I really like that the foreign languages are, I guess, officially incorporating culture. I mean, I feel like they always try to do it a little bit, but now it's actually part of the title. So I really like that.
Yeah, and
That's
not just
all.
part of the title, the College Board has shifted its framework, its course frameworks to include a large component of culture in all of their AP courses.
Good.
Yes, Mrs. Franklin.
I just have a silly question, but what do we do with the old textbooks?
That's a good question. So we send them out for recycling, so distribution. Usually at the end of every year, we send out a memo to schools to say, so here are the textbooks that are being replaced this year, please. And they give them a location and a time where they'll be picked up. And then distribution services picks them up and sends them out for recycling.
And when you say recycling, because I'm a business person, so I always think about how can we either make money or do a charitable donation. But so when you say recycling, is that something that what does recycling mean?
I can't honestly tell you that,
Yeah.
but I do know that we sometimes that they do try to sell back books to resellers.
Mhm.
So we have a couple of resellers that I know we work with for purchasing books as well if we need to, if we can't get them from the publishing company themselves. But we also, I know distribution services will see what they can sell back, sell to those companies as well.
And is that ever allocated in the budget if that's
That I
successful or
don't
not?
know. I don't know.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right then. And again, we will follow up with any additional questions, and this will be on for consent next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So welcome back, Mr. Delaney. Now we're moving on to science.
Yes, thank you, and good evening again. Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, and members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I'm here this evening to provide you with information regarding the textbook adoption committee selection for secondary science, specifically AP Biology and AP Physics 1 and 2. Textbooks recommended for consideration are scheduled for implementation this fall of 2021. Before presenting our recommendations, I would like to thank the secondary science coordinator, Amanda Malbin, and our team of instructional specialists, committee members, parents, students, and industry experts for dedicating their time and efforts to choose the best textbooks for our students. As Dr. DeFries shared with you just a few moments ago, the textbook adoption process during her presentation, which is modeled after the VDOE textbook procurement process. As a reminder, the first step in the process is to research open education resources to see if there are any out there for use, and if so, if they're aligned to the standards, comprehensive to serve as a primary resource, and if they're of high quality. From there, if a suitable OER is found, the committee agrees that this is the best resource for the course. The text is put out for public and teacher review and then brought before the school board for approval. In this instance, the secondary science textbook we are presenting are both OER textbooks. The committee has selected biology for AP courses as its first choice textbook for use in AP Biology. The text is aligned to the curriculum framework and set forth by College Board and is found on the College Board's list of example texts for this course. The book from OpenStax is updated regularly based on feedback from its users. We will move the book over to CK12 for full customization and regular yearly updates to ensure students are receiving the most up-to-date science content. Additionally, feedback from the committee and student, parent, and higher education representatives noted this was an easy to follow and comprehensive of what is taught in this course. The committee did not recommend a second choice for the AP Biology book because the committee determined an RFP was not necessary, and this text is acceptable for the course. This slide outlines the cost implications for the initial and total implementation for AP Biology. There are no costs associated with choosing this textbook. The committee has selected College Physics AP courses as its first choice textbook for use in AP Physics 1 and AP Physics 2. Text is aligned to the curriculum framework as set forth by the College Board and is also found on the College Board's list of example texts for these courses. The book from OpenStax is going to be updated regularly based on feedback from its users. This book will also be moved over CK12 for full customization and regular yearly updates to ensure students are receiving the most up-to-date science content. Additionally, feedback from the committee and student and parent and higher education representatives noted this was easy to follow and comprehensive of what is taught in this course. Likewise, the committee did not recommend a second choice for the AP Physics 1 and 2 book because the committee determined an RFP was not necessary and this text was acceptable for the course. This slide outlines the cost implications for the initial and total implementation for AP Physics. There are no costs associated with choosing this textbook. Thank you for your consideration of the committee's recommendations. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I always feel bad following Dr. DeFries because we seem to find some OER. And
I just thought it was student-friendly language. I didn't know what you were saying. I saw $0. Okay. It does say zero. I asked Mrs. Anderson if she was going with you, but she didn't respond, so you might want to.
Mrs. Anderson, do you care to comment? Are you in the queue?
I do not care to comment, I'm sorry.
Anybody else? So we thank you, and again, we'll have this on next agenda.
thank you. Have a good evening.
Please thank your science team for us. And Mrs. Linetti, welcome back to the information section of our agenda. And I guess I see here 5, so turn it over to you.
2 bylaws, the 3 policies, and Appendix C, which is actually part of your bylaws section. And Madam Chair, Vice Chair, school board members, and Dr. Spence, I'm Cami Linetti, and on behalf of the Policy Review Committee, I'll be presenting information on 3 bylaws, an appendix, and 2 policies that came out of the November and the December PRC meetings. They've been delayed several times due to some of the meetings on there. You have had some discussions today about them. Some of these policies I mentioned, the issues you were discussing are embedded in some of these policies and bylaws, so I'm going to go ahead and talk through some of these for you. The first law is bylaw 128, and this seems to be a perennial bylaw we keep bringing back multiple times a year to do. 128 has to do with committees, organizations, and boards. And the first section was talks about general matters. We talked about section A is assignments. You just went through your assignment process. The recommendations came from your chair and your vice chair, and they were voted on by the school board members. This is the section that some of you were talking about earlier. The recommendation would be, unless otherwise specified, the school board chair, in consultation with the vice chair, will recommend to the school board and others, and school board members and others to be assigned to committees. School board by majority vote will appoint school board committee members by July 1st of each year. Down a little bit further, it goes through the criteria that you're going to use. The order of the list does not indicate importance of the factor. That is a recommendation we're adding, and it goes through the 9 recommended areas. So it's minor changes in some of these areas, but those were the 9 recommended criteria that would be in there. Following over on the first paragraph on the second page that follows after section I, we would at the end of the first paragraph, the sentence would read, assignments to a committee are effective June 30th of each year or until such time as school board appoints new committee members. That is because sometimes you carry over, or because of the pandemic this year, we end up carrying over some of our committees. Moving on to subsection 6, which talks about the committee chair. Also a similar recommendation, until such time as the new committee chair is elected, the current committee chair may continue to serve as the committee chair as long as the committee chair remains appointed to the committee. So in those cases, and it's happened, it more likely happens in sometimes your student discipline cases, you don't have the actual members on that particular committee, don't always meet the first meeting, but you have to get through a student discipline case. So this means that committee members will carry over. Of course, if for some reason you've lost a school board member through an election, appointment, or resignation, that they would, otherwise the chair would remain unless that person isn't there. And there are other provisions in this particular bylaw that deal with what happens in those circumstances. Section 7 is roles and responsibilities of committee chair. We were recommending after that to add a section 8, which would be school board standing committees will follow the school board standing committee procedures as set forth in school board bylaw appendix C. That's going to be the last one I recommend to you as a bringer. I actually brought this to the GRC a couple of governance committee several times this year because I was seeing inconsistencies in how the school board committees are being handled. And I wanted to make sure that they were handled in the same manner the information was available to individuals looking for it, particularly since we're working in a situation where almost everything has to be electronic right now. We wanted to make it available to the public. So I'm going to deal with that later on. This addition would make it clear that if you're the committee chairs or you're sitting in these committees, you're going to follow the rules that we're going to propose in Appendix C. Excuse me. Going on to Section 4 is the governance committee. There is a list on the following page on there that lists multiple subsections of the duties. We are recommending to add a subsection, let me renumber this, but add a new subsection K, establish protocol and procedure subject to review by the school board regarding school board meetings and other matters relating to the school board. Again, we're not talking about resetting a specific amount of time, but sometimes things have to be dealt with, or there needs to be a more significant conversation involving how school board meetings are conducted. That would then be assigned to the governance committee because governance committee has 5 school board members who are major committee chair members and the chair of the school board. We felt that was a better location for those discussions to take place. Moving on to subsection 7, you see student disciplinary committees. After some discussion that came to light in the fall, we decided it was probably time to formalize how you deal with the agenda planning committee. Agenda Planning Committee is a rotating committee. After each school board meeting, the chair and the superintendent and one school board member as rotating member sit down and work on the agenda planning for the following regular school board meeting. This has been a process that's been in for the past 20 years. It's been formalized. We decided to go ahead and make sure that this was clear that this was a committee. So this current section would now add number 8 as Agenda Planning Committee. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I will summarize for you, make it clear that the Agenda Planning Committee will be formed and will have responsibility for the formal meeting agenda. It goes through the procedure, so it's not just the chair recommending or the superintendent, it is this particular committee. Within this particular section, it will also talk to you about how you get matters on and go through them and how they're going to vote on them. And they're going to create a committee agenda for the meetings. They're going to maintain meeting minutes, and they will not be required to maintain school board meeting minutes because the end result will be the actual agenda that they produce. But they are going to be required to publish notice of the meeting dates and times, allow the public to access such meetings. The annual notice of agenda planning committee times and dates will be posted, and any changes will be publicly posted within a reasonable amount of time. And the agenda planning committee for each regular school board meeting will have authority to develop the proposed formal meeting for the meeting that the school board planning committee was assigned. The school board has final authority over the adoption of formal meeting agenda and may amend the formal meeting agenda as it deems appropriate. The chair, vice chair, and superintendent designee will serve as a agenda planning committee for any other school board meeting. So in this, we call a special meeting, an annual meeting, they're going to be the chair, so you don't have to go to your regular meeting. Again, this is a process you've used basically for as long as I've been here, which is well over 2 decades now. But we're formalizing it here to make it clear. So that would be the recommendation for that. Now moving into subsection F, this says school division standing committees with school member liaisons. School division standing committees are the superintendent's appointed committees. They're not yours, but he does arrange for you to have a liaison to them. We wanted to make clear that voting rights of school board members serving as liaisons are determined by the committee. Well, generally, as a liaison would not have voting rights. In this case, it depends on the committee that you've been assigned to, whether you may or may not have voting rights. We just made that clarification there. Also under there, we are two standing. The Equity Council is the one that's on there. We've now moved up the 403 Plan Oversight Committee. This has become formalized. It was at Mr. Edwards' recommendation because he used to serve on that. We needed to make it clear that this is a permanent standing committee now. It has important work that it does. 403B plans are investment plans that school employees have. You would be overseeing the investments on them. Mr. Edwards has served for many years with that particular committee. He wanted to make sure that that was formalized as a standing committee. There have been some minor changes with that over the year. So that's now been added as a school board standing committee.
Mrs. Linetti, may I interrupt just a quick moment?
Yes.
This is the committee established just last year, and the deferred comp is the one that's been more longstanding.
Yes, but part of it, they've had some combined responsibilities in some of these areas. There, because of changes with VRS and other things that have happened in the last couple of years, there have been some changes. They do similar type of work. So if you serve on one, like Mr. Edwards has served on both of those for many years because the work is very similar. It's important work to protect the interests of the school division employees and their retirement accounts on the similar but different work. It is a 403B is strictly for the school division because 403B is a deferred type comp plan that only school board employees can have. Deferred comp with VRS, because you combine them with the city, you could be a city and schools on it. So that is a combined city school count committee. This one is actually internal to the school division. Under 6 is outside committees. These are committees that you are not necessarily responsible for establishing, but you're offered the opportunity to place a school board member on, or their committees, organizations, or boards for which we are standing members. We form part of the governing body for those. And this one was just a minor change, but the school board chair will recommend the changes instead of appoint, and the school board shall make the final appointment. The Access College Foundation no longer requires that you have an appointed member to it. So we have substituted in this stage the Green Run Collegiate Charter Board, which you've always had a member to that, but that was not included formally on the outside committees. And number 8, which was the 403B board, which had been at one point combined as a compensation board, city schools compensation board, because it's no longer part of the city's compensation board. We moved that one, just moved up to the school division standing committees. But the Deferred Compensation Board is a standing compensation board that works with both the city, and this is a joint committee, so we would need a member under there. So that's the formal board that was created, formalized when you split out the 403B issues. So we're adding that in subsection B to replace the compensation board that used the plan oversight compensation board. These are not significant changes in those areas, but just clarifying some of them. So that is a lot of information for bylaw 128. I'll put that out there. Does anyone want to have further conversation about bylaw 128?
The 403B committee and the
Deferred
deferred compensation, you mentioned our city council approved. And
Not
just
403B anymore.
Okay.
403 separated
Okay.
back to schools.
So whoever, I just want to just throw it out there, whoever's on that committee will also have required paperwork with the city. So I believe
the
it's the
statement of
conflict of
economic- yeah, the
interest
statement of economic
forms that we fill out for school board. You will also have to submit them to the city if you're on a city council approved committee. Mrs. Manning.
Mrs. Manning. Oh, to speak, Mrs. Manning.
So I would like to talk about item number 8, Agenda Planning Committee. And while I agree that this needed to be better defined, there is a part of it that I do have some concerns with. While I believe that the superintendent should have, a big part of this, and I think Dr. Spence does a great job of agenda planning and having everything prepared, he and his staff. The part in here where all 3 committee members will have voting rights. I have a problem with that. I called Miss Weems since she is the person that's been on the board the longest, and I said, has a superintendent ever been given a vote on a committee? And as long as she's been on the board, she has never known of that to occur. I also spoke to a city council member and asked him if a city manager has ever had an actual vote. And he said no, not, and he's been on the council for quite a while, and he said no. So I just don't believe that it's appropriate for someone who reports to the elected body to have a vote, especially an equivalent vote, on a committee of the board. I don't even know if that's addressed in law as to whether it's legal or not. I don't feel it's appropriate.
It's
So
not a legal matter. I'll explain that for you. This is it's not a required committee. This is a committee that you have, and you can designate who would have voting rights on this. It would not pose a conflict of interest for him to vote on something of this nature.
I mean, it may be semantics here, but it is the superintendent who offers the proposed draft. I mean, that's our starting point, and it's been through a lot of process before it even gets to this
Yeah, and I fully
point.
support that.
Yeah.
But it's different when you're saying he has a vote. And that's what this bylaw says. And I actually think it puts him in an awkward situation as well, so.
I can't recall an agenda committee, planning committee ever taking a vote.
Well, I
In my
agree,
7
but this
years.
says voting rights. The superintendent will have voting rights.
I'm trying to add, like, to your point. I actually
Yeah.
don't know that any voting rights are even necessary.
Right.
Cammy, I don't know how you would talk about, only reason being, I mean, literally in 7 years, there's never been a vote. It's simply been an agreement of the 3 people that are
Right.
talking, and then it's pressed out for comment by your colleagues.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
The question came up in the fall as to somebody wanting to add information on there and whether you would have 2 school board members on it, and if one of the school board members disagree, how would you move forward with it? So that became some of the discussions as to who would be the voting members who participated in it. Also, by elevating it to a school board committee that's going to, because you're doing the business of the school board, you trip yourself into the free and information requirements. So if you're going to vote and make a decision, this has to be handled as a regular school board assigned committee.
I have no idea what to recommend to you all in that scenario, because again, we've never voted, and in every scenario where it's been a need to change the agenda, it's generally, I've called the chair, and the chair has checked with whoever the other person was. And there have been at least one instance perhaps where that was like, no, they didn't want to do that, and so then the motion was made at the meeting to change the agenda.
Yeah, so my recommendation would be to just remove the voting aspect of it and just deal with it how we have been. And, if a member wants an item on the agenda, it gets put on the agenda. And if the board doesn't want that item to be on the agenda, the board has the authority to remove it at the next school board meeting, or conversely to add it if the majority of the board wants to do that. But I just don't think it's proper to have that statement of voting rights.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Mrs. Hughes.
I guess a lot of this has been discussed already, but I would be against putting something in a bylaw that has the superintendent voting on an agenda item. I was on agenda planning when somebody wanted to add something, and I was told by the chair that there was a 2-to-1 vote against it. So that was a time when at least I was told that there was a vote on it. There are things that are inappropriate for board members to do, like go into a school and direct a teacher, things like that that are under his purview. But there are also things that are inappropriate for him to do, and voting on these items is one of those things. When you have an agenda planning committee, you have 2 board members who I guess ultimately would, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It should be with, counsel and advice and recommendations from the superintendent, but ultimately the final agenda rests with the board members that are on the agenda planning committee for that cycle. So I think that it should be taken out.
And Mrs. Hughes, with respect, and if I know the situation we're speaking of, and I would be very surprised, I don't think I would have thought of using the term vote, but the point being, right, that what do you do when the 2 school board members are deadlocked with an agenda request before it gets posted? And that's, I appreciate the effort made to try, and it's not an easy thing to address, but that is that is the background to why we was winding up in that pickle a few times, and how could that be addressed? I don't have the magic solution.
Well, unless something can clearly be shown to be inappropriate, if a board member asks for something to be added to the agenda, it should be. And there are times when it's inappropriate because it would take staff much longer to prepare things in time for that meeting, or it's something that, maybe there's a whole lot going on right now that it could be pushed off for another meeting.
Right.
But unless you can show that, I don't think any of the 11 board members we have are just asking for things to be added on for their own entertainment. And rarely does it seem that people just reach out to have something added on once there's already an agenda. So unless there's some kind of abuse of it, I don't think it should be a problem.
Well, you mentioned the consideration so that people would understand. I mean, there's no absolute right to the request, but when it's reasonable and it falls in line with the other agenda topics, I mean, these are all, and I agree that if there are with 2 board members each time, hopefully these things can be sorted out, and we would seek staff input. I mean, is this a case of going back to this is an entire new section that's proposed?
Correct. This is one of the ones that came out of the November meetings. In addition to this, has not been before you before, but PRC meets between now and the next school board meeting, so we could take a look at it again.
Could we just put 3 school board members on there with
We
Dr.
could
Spence?
also put 3 school board members on.
That will just increase the number of times that we meet, but we can continue to go in order. And then that takes away his vote. You have the 3 people. It's very, very difficult to conduct business like that with an even number of people. So we just add another board member and be done with it.
Mrs. Manning?
So I have a suggestion. I anticipate that the original intent of having an alternating board member on with the chair is so that every board member had an opportunity to put an item on the agenda. So as long as it's germane to school board business and, we're not out there adding items to the agenda that don't pertain to school board business, I think that a school board member has a right to put whatever they want on the agenda pertaining to school board business. And the chair can't override it, the board member can't override it, obviously in consultation with the superintendent and staff. But if if the school board doesn't want that agenda item when it comes around to meeting time, they can take it off. They can vote to take it off. The majority can. So I think we need to encourage diverse opinions. And when you're trying to say you can't put an item on the agenda, you are trying to stifle diverse opinions. And so I don't understand the problem, why you want to stop anyone, whether I agree with them or not, or whether I agree with the agenda item or not. Why wouldn't we want them to be able to put an item on the agenda?
Again, it's not limited to just the rotating member. Any member at any time can request it, right? I mean, I'm not disagreeing with.
So, but the way, and this is a little confusing to me, the language that's in here right now. And so that's a different conversation. And I see that point and I agree with that, but the way it's been in the past is that they would have to come to either the chair or the board member assigned to agenda planning, and then, say, Sharon was on, Miss Felton was on agenda planning, and I wasn't. I contacted Miss Felton and said, Miss Felton, here's something that I would like to put on agenda planning. Miss Felton could decide whether or not she's going to bring that forward, since she is the person assigned to agenda planning at that point. And if she felt that she agreed with it and it should be on there, she could add that.
And we've already, I think we all are in agreement, timing matters too, as to, if a certain week is a heavy agenda, and we all agree it's a topic worthy of discussion, but why another date would be more suitable, these are worthy discussions.
I agree, but hopefully we could come to an agreement on that without having to start adding more board members to more committees and more.
I mean, I can suggest that this just be struck for now and we continue to proceed as we have been and just, if situations develop that we need more input on, we'll have informal discussions as they arise. But if this is going to make things more, the point isn't to make anything worse. And I appreciate, again, I didn't come up with the language, but I didn't offer to either. I just offered it as a situation, but these are things chairs have to muddle through sometimes, and we'll continue to do that.
I will note that governance committee is due to meet next week. This might be something they can talk about, or whether there's a different process. I will also note for your next bylaw that I'm going to present is 139, which is actual agenda planning. So depending on what you do with that one, it might direct the necessity of what the power is of person serving on the agenda planning committee. Would you like to hold off and take this back? I can send it back to governance, or I can take it back to policy review committee the following week.
Mrs. Riggs, as the PRC chair, are you okay with just right now striking it to not hold up the rest of the bylaw, because it seems to be creating more issues than it's trying to resolve?
I'm fine with, if you want to strike it, just to move this, bylaw forward. And, I know you guys wanted to have the agenda planning as a committee. And I know that when we discussed it, Kimmy we asked her to write it like she does for us in recommendations as a committee. So that's why all of these components are in there. I don't have a problem with striking it. I don't know about the rest of you, but.
Again, it's only on information at this time, so we can send it back. It doesn't have to come back. It can be reconsidered. I will tell you, in my opinion for you would be, depending on what you do with the agenda planning, the agenda preparation, if it eliminates the need for the agenda planning members to make or inability to prevent certain matters from going forward, it may not be as necessary to have the three people on that you're talking about. Maybe the two. If the two are just basically doing procedural things and pushing it forward, the necessity of having three people to have a tiebreaker may not be that important. you could come back with the plan that you did on planning committee with just the two people with that, and the superintendent does not have to have voting rights. You would just have the school board members if there's a need to vote.
All right.
May I speak?
Mrs. Anderson?
Thank you. In all the years that I've been on the board, as Dr. Spence pointed out, we've never had a time where we've had to vote, as the agenda planning committee. There have been times, however, when the superintendent has said, yeah, it'd be great to have that on the agenda, but our staff doesn't have the time, or we need more time to be able to put that on the agenda. So if we could hold that off until a following meeting, in other words, letting us know that, you know, it might not be time relevant, or, you know, I think we need to be able to listen to his input. But I don't recall us ever having to vote on whether something was put on an agenda or not. There might be a reason that we didn't, but there might not. So that's just my opinion on it. And I'm okay if we strike the words that have to do with voting.
Referring to, and then to make a determination.
139 is next. Is your next
Okay.
one you're looking at.
Do we have to have the line, all three committee members will have voting rights? Do we have to have that in
Do
there?
not.
Take it out. Keep the rest of it, but take that out.
I actually think there's another line in here we would have to.
I mean, if we don't need the voting part, and we haven't done it, let's take that out.
I may need to play with a little bit more of the language in here to get it correct for the next time, but we can bring it back with the agenda planning committee being as adopted as section 8 without the line about voting.
Right.
But I think the language I'm concerned at may then be in bylaw 139, so we need to look at that. But
Okay.
Are there any other sections in bylaw 128 that you wanted to look at?
I'm just not sure if Mrs. Anderson is still in the queue, if she wants back in.
I will go back over with, I will have the opportunity of policy review before the next school board meeting to make sure anything I'm proposing is consistent with what you want. We will bring it back then for you to look at. All right, I'm going to move on then. If there are no more questions on 128, I will move on to 139. 139 is agenda planning or agenda preparation. The first section under there is notification of meetings, and of course this section will be the chair, one school board member appointed by the chair on a rotating basis, and the superintendent or designee will constitute the agenda planning committee for each regularly scheduled school board meeting. The agenda planning committee will plan a proposed agenda for upcoming meetings. I may have to change that depending on what we do with this. Then in section C, this has to do with agenda items. This may be a better area for you to look at for the concerns discussed during the last bylaw. Agenda items. The chair, the superintendent or designee, or one other school board member appointed on a rotating basis will serve as the voting members of the agenda planning committee for each regularly scheduled school board meeting and will be responsible for development of the agenda for that meeting. Prior to the public posting of the formal meeting agenda, school board members or the superintendent designee will present to the agenda planning committee assigned to the agenda planning for the forthcoming meeting a request for addition of matters they wish to have considered for inclusion on the agenda. The quarterly forecast will be considered in guiding the development of each meeting agenda, and the agenda planning committee will determine what matter will be included on the agenda for the next meeting. The agenda planning committee will take into consideration the time available for all proposed topics, the preparation time necessary for presentation, and other relevant matters before setting the final agenda. Items should not be placed on the action agenda without consideration being given to providing adequate public notice. If two or more agenda planning committee members agree that a matter should be added on, or removed from the formal meeting agenda before the formal meeting agenda is published, the matter will be so handled. New paragraph. After the formal meeting agenda has been published, school board members or the superintendent designee may request to the agenda planning committee that additional items be added to or removed from the published formal meeting agenda. Addition of or removal of the published formal meeting agenda items requires the approval of 2 or more members of the meeting's agenda planning committee. Agenda planning committee do not approve. Sorry, I missed that one. If 2 or more members of the agenda of that meeting's agenda planning committee do not approve of adding to or removing an item from the published formal meeting agenda, that requesting school board member may make a motion at the meeting to add to or remove the item from the meeting agenda. As you can see, that was how we got to the process for this. Now, let me explain. A couple things are going on here. To make it clear, you were required by the Freedom of Information Act to publish the agenda 3 days before your meeting if it's a regular meeting. So for a Tuesday meeting, we want to get it in Thursday or Friday, if possible, to make the necessary time period for it, which means you've got to finalize it. So on Wednesday, the clerk puts out the draft agenda, which is your chance to look at it and make corrections. Once it's published, that's what the public believes is going to be on the agenda. Not that you can't change it, but you've given the public notice of it. So it's more important at that point that you be careful as to what you're adjusting on the public so they have an opportunity to know what's going to happen. Clearly, you can amend it on there, but there have been concerns about whether the public understood what was on the agenda, whether school board members had appropriately arranged meeting times and other things based on what was on the agenda. So once it's formally published, you want to be more careful about what you're going to amend, and that's how some of this procedure came up. There's a difference between a proposed agenda, there's a difference between the formal agenda. You always have the right, after the agenda planning committee makes a recommendation, it's out there, you can come back to the agenda planning committee and say, listen, this just came up over the weekend, I think we need to add it. They can do that, or we're not ready for that, you can take it off. If the process then was, if the agenda planning committee members agreed to that, that's how you took it off the formal agenda. Otherwise, if you don't agree, you can't get an agreement, you can make an amendment to when the board adopts the agenda at the regular meeting. You can then say, I want to add this on there, or I want to remove it. They can do that to agenda planning. So that was always a backup that the full school board could do that. The concern was, what do you do between when you've put out the formal meeting and that's what the public knows, and there is an agreement on changing that. So that's what this procedure was sort of designed to do. And then because we are formalizing who voted on that with the agenda planning committee, that's how you get the voting pieces in there, which is why we just changed 128 to match the procedure here to get some agreement as to how you're going to deal with the dispute. That's the interplay between the two of them. So that's why I'm explaining. If you look at, depending on what you do with this, it may change what you want to do with bylaw 128 on the agenda planning committee.
Mrs. Hughes and then Mrs. Melnick.
You know, actually, when you mentioned publishing, it made me think of something that applies actually to this and the last one. We can't just add a third person on because then that would be a public meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finished? Yeah. Okay. Are you okay? Mm-hmm. So somehow this has morphed into something really complicated.
Yes.
I just don't ever remember. I mean, under Mr. Edwards' tutelage, we were all taught that if a board member wanted to add something, we just added it. And I don't ever remember a time where we've denied a board member that ability. And we've even amended, we've gone back, but I think this has gotten really complicated. I think this is something really simple. We meet with the chair and the superintendent. He presents an agenda, we go over it, we pick the time, we look at the information, we talk about all the little things that happen or could happen. Sometimes it's 3 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes, and then we're done. It's the easiest committee, and it's rotating, so do the math. There are 11 board members. It happens twice a month, and we're done. I just don't know how this...
So speaking to your point, one point that did need clarification, and this attempts to do that, was there is a distinction between before an agenda is posted and after it is. And the understanding, and the bylaw language was very vague, but I was always taught that once it's posted, then the member waits until the school board meeting, and when you're ready to adopt the agenda, that's when you propose the amendment then. So at the very least, we need that clarification, I think everybody, I mean, that's just fair to everybody.
And there were some communications out there, and I know we've talked with both governance and policy review about the importance of understanding your role in the agenda process. It starts before you actually adopt the agenda at the meeting. You're sent out the draft on Wednesday, so it's really important that you look on Wednesday and say, oh, I wanted to add this, because when you call Monday and say, I want to add this, there are some legitimate concerns. I think that's what led to some of this. Not that your issues aren't important and they couldn't be on there, but if it's a really important issue and the public only found out on Tuesday morning when we published it, that could be a concern. If the superintendent and his staff are not able to put together the information you need in presentation or speakers on Tuesday because you added it on Monday night, that's also a concern. So it is a whole board's responsibility in developing the agenda. The agenda planning committee helps draft it up there, but when you see that formalized, the draft formal agenda come out on Wednesday, you really need to look and say, oh, I need to add something. I need to get back to them, because once it's published, it does make a difference. It's not impossible to change. There's certainly procedures for it, but there are concerns that I've heard of almost every school board member. Is it fair to the public that they didn't know about it? I didn't know that that was coming up on there because it was such short notice. So again, I'll put it out there. While this is a complicated procedure to do, understanding the whole board has a role in this procedure,
Right.
even though certain people are assigned for each meeting.
But as rarely as that happens, the default is, the board member can make an amendment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mrs. Manning?
Yeah, and I think I'm on the same page with Ms. Melnick. Obviously there's a distinction between beforehand, the chair and the alternating school board member in consultation with the superintendent create the agenda items, and they have the ability to add agenda items. After the fact, once it's been published, could we just say it needs to be addressed at the school board meeting, whether or not it's going to stay on or it's going to be removed?
You can. Sometimes it's really important, and now you need to make some decisions from them. And that could be where we give governance, right? You might need, because the issue you put on was so important, it might increase the amount of speakers and issues that you may want to actually put it out ahead of time. There might be reasons for it. It's not necessarily wrong to do it that way, but you could see where 2 or 3 days notice of an issue might help, as opposed to waiting to the night of the school board to add a really important, school board meeting to add an important issue. And it might be that the agenda planning committee says, yes, you're right, that is a very important issue. Let's get it on the agenda, let everybody know about it on Sunday. If you do it the way you're suggesting, you can't make that amendment until Tuesday when the meeting starts.
Right. Well, I guess removing would be something removing an item, that's pretty cut and dry. There would be no.
There's potential notice out there. If it was originally on there, the public had some notice, and that's probably not going to be a major issue to tell them it's not on this time.
Right. So, we also have the ability for someone to call a special meeting if it's a topic that's so important that needs to be addressed. A special meeting could be called even on the same day to provide that notice.
Correct.
So there is another way if there is some outlier out there of an issue that needs to be addressed and the public needs to be notified, we could do it that way.
You could. It's up to you and how you want to handle it.
Just a suggestion to try to simplify what I'm having a tough time understanding in this current writing.
So that sounds like the ask to try to simplify what the core issue is.
Well, it's a good thing I have a policy review committee and a governance committee coming up, because I will take this back again. So I think I understand your issues, and we'll have further discussions on them.
We appreciate that, thank you.
The only other thing in this would have been this section, you've seen this before, we took out of the standing rules stuff that did not appear to be actually so much gender related. This is issues having to do with school board awards, recognitions, and criteria that used to be in your standing rules. We just picked it up and put it over here with the agenda because we thought that was more appropriate in the agenda. You've seen that before. Okay, so I'm taking 128 and 129 back. Okay. 436, payroll deductions. After speaking, we took a lot of the finance-related issues to Mr. Hunsaker, your Chief Financial Officer, to look at, and he said there really was no reason to have these things in policy having to do with tax shelter, annuity, the TSAs, or the deferred comp plan because there are other policies or their state regulations. He didn't feel that they needed to be defined out here in policy. He did want the payroll deductions because you do have to have the authority to do payroll deductions in here, but he felt it was no longer necessary to have these two, Section B and Section C, in here because they're handled elsewhere by law and by other policies on there. So he's recommending that we delete that. The Policy Review Committee agreed with that. It does not cause any changes to the ability to handle the deferred compensation plan. Are there any questions on 436? 432 is employee associations. Recommendation came through also from Human Resources and from Finance. In Section D, this has to do with additional services. It says, in addition to the foregoing, any employee association as defined by this policy shall be entitled the following. Section 1 has to do with the prior approval of the superintendent or designee, and employee association members may take leave to conduct employee association business, provided the employee association reimburses the school division the actual expenses for required substitutes for school board members approved for association leave. Before, you would have said for any such leave taken, which reimbursement shall be at the member's hourly rate of pay. HR fellow is more accurate to say actual expenses for required substitute for the members approved for association leave. It doesn't change it significantly, but HR felt that better represented what they were billing for. And that would be the recommendation for the Human Resources Department for policy 432. There are no questions on that. I want to move to Appendix C. Within your bylaws, you have two appendixes. One is A and one B. You saw them earlier today, the standing rules and the standing orders of business on there. Appendix C, I proposed coming out of it. It came, as you're seeing from the committees, there have been a lot of discussion on committees. You are responsible for certain committees, boards and organizations you are not necessarily responsible for, but those committees you assign to do constitute formal committees. In most cases, they are subject to the Freedom of Information Act, which means they have rules having to do with notice of meetings, minutes for meetings, agendas open to the public. My concern with some of these committees was that not everybody was familiar with the rules or following them. We have standardized a lot of that. Brought this to Governance Committee last year. We talked about it for a number of months. My recommendation is you would adopt this entire policy. I did not put in red just because it was so much information to look at. This would actually set out the procedures that the school board committees are going to use. In most cases, if you're on student discipline agenda, you've seen these kind of procedures before. I do them with the Governance Committee and from PRC on them. We wanted to make sure that everybody was following the same procedures. So these would be procedures. They are modified but similar to what you do with the school board, because when you have 3 or more school board members on a committee, you automatically constitute a school board meeting. You therefore must follow the school board meeting rules. In this particular recommendation, what we're doing here, we've also noted that there will be a staff member. Although your committees, you have a school board member as the chair of them, and the school board chair then has certain responsibilities for maintaining what is going on here. There will be a formal staff member assigned who will take responsibility for compliance. In the case, if you sat with me in governance, I handle the governance one. Mr. Sutton handles the PRC. Terry Pyatt, your internal auditor, handles audit. Mr. McGee handles student discipline. They are already being handled by a staff member. We want to make it clear that the staff member will work with the chair to make sure you're in compliance. You would have seen, if you're on the governance committee worked with the meeting communications department. They developed a school board committee webpage for you. If you haven't seen it, it's been up for at least 6 months, I think now. If you go to that committee, if you enter policy review committee, you would see the agenda that's coming up. You'll see a full calendar. When we get the minutes up there, I think we've put some of the policy review committees up there. I know I have governance up there. We will be moving the other committees on there. There's a calendar for it. If you want to go to the Zoom link for governance next week, the notice is there. You can click on it. You'll be able to get the agenda. You can go click right into the Zoom meeting for the public. All that's available on that committee. That is that committee webpage, that's down here. And the rest of the rules are just making sure that the committee members understand what the rules are and the chair understands who will work on that. So this whole procedure is just a modified procedure for the committees to make sure that they stay in compliance. And again, if you're chair of one of these committees, don't panic. We're not putting all this responsibility on you. There is a staff member that is designated to make sure you're in compliance, who will work with that staff member. And then the goal was that all the committees would have, for the most part, consistent rules on how they do that. So you'll be able to locate them, you'll be able to find the minutes, you'll see their agendas, you will know what's available to that, and that will be available to you and the public. So my recommendation, after a lot of work with governance committee, is that you adopt Appendix C, make that Appendix C, there's your committee rules on there, so that it'll standardize some of your committees, kind of backs up bylaw 128, which I'm not sure when that will come back, but these will be the rules for all the committees when it's eventually done. At this time, those are the recommendations out of the Policy Review Committee. Are there any questions on Appendix C?
If I may, with regard to the proposed protocols manual, it's listed as Appendix F, if that matters.
The protocols manual has those appendix for them are just related to the protocols manual. They don't comply
Oh, they
with.
don't correspond, okay.
No, that is just it's an attachment to them.
Right, I caught a few typos with, Trinace has those and she can get those to you offline.
Right.
But the other that, because it isn't, it's a slight rise above a typo, just in section D, other matters. I think we need to, it's supposed, the committee chair may inform the school board and the public of the work of the, I think that should be the committee, not of the school board. That was my only other point that I missed in earlier readings.
Yes.
That's it for me. Thank you. Anybody else with questions or comments?
There are some weighty matters, and also based on some of the discussion we had during the mini retreat today, if you have ideas or suggestions, I have time between governance. We'll look at some of this, but most of it will be at PRC, which will be the second meeting in February coming up. So there is time to get that information to me, and I will send it up to Mrs. Riggs and the committee members to look at.
Thank you. Standing committee reports. Who has anything they care to report? I know it's a new year, but Mrs. Riggs?
I just wanted to make a quick report on the sister cities. I met with the executive board yesterday. I'm continuing to be the what do you call my place? It's getting
Liaison?
late. I'm also the liaison, but I'm also on the executive board because I'm the treasurer. That's what I am. And anyway, you know, we've had our student ambassador, and we've done it every year. But because of what, you know, with the pandemic, we continue that student ambassador that we had chosen last year for this year. And because we usually choose it, you know, have the competition and all that in March, we are not going to be have a formal student ambassador this year. So I just wanted to let everyone know. Yeah, it's just kind of hard. I mean, we're not bringing back our secondary students until what, the 23rd of February. So, and we usually have it at the first part. So it's just kind of been very difficult. We'll let our student ambassador that has been the student ambassador for the last year and a half continue and finish this year. So, and then we'll be talking about it again, and I'll let you know an update on that. Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Melnick, and then Mrs. Felton.
So the audit committee is going to meet on Thursday, and I announced that for the public, but also for you, Mrs. Franklin, since you were just approved this evening, and you will get an email from Terry Pyatt tomorrow. It's Zoom, so it's 1:00.
Okay, Mrs. Felton.
And I'll talk to you afterwards.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. I just, and it is late, I'd just like to add more to the announcement that Dr. Spence made earlier concerning the Black History Program, Reflection of a Legacy, Building for the Present Through Persistent Perseverance and Pride, that will be airing on Saturday, the 6th of February. And what I really want to highlight on that is that our students will be the planning committee for this conference. And I would encourage you to go to the website and go in and participate as well. I'm always excited when our students are active in these committees or active in any programs that we have, especially like Sister City that we have, that we're not going to have. We're disappointed about that, but I understand. But whenever our students are involved, it is important that we encourage them to proceed on Also, this conference, which will be held on February the 6th, Saturday, is open to grades 6 and 12. And again, I just had to reiterate that the keynote speaker will be Councilman Aaron Rouse. It will be an intentional history and background, intentional focusing on Virginia Beach history. They'll be talking about the 37 African American students that first integrated the schools. So I would encourage you to, on February the 6th or Saturday, go in and look at this and encourage our students that we have great faith and fortitude in them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we did get an email on that, and anybody, I'm sure, can refer back to you if they need it resent. So please consider that. Anybody else? Okay, and one of the, since this involves two committees, the two new committees, governance and planning and performance monitoring, we will choose a workshop in February to just take 5 or 10 minutes to cover what we had intended to today during the workshop, during the retreat. Okay, so with that.
Chair, I'm sorry. I'd just like to say that this program is under the auspices of the Equity Council, which Dr. Parrott is the director, and Dr. Law is the coordinator with the students. This is coming under the Equity Council department. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you again. So we still have a few more matters of business. This is the conclusion of the formal meeting, and we will now switch to hearing of citizens and delegations on non-agenda items.